Hello, Story Studio. It's me. I am Stephen Thomas Graham, and I'm here to share my goals for 2019. And I pretty much am excited, right now to be sharing the goals. Boy. Now, I know that, well before I took up this challenge for the goals, I, made resolutions, that I made as well. But for the purpose of this video, I'd like to share with all of you guys here the goals that I hope to achieve, which I take it to mean for the end of 2019. Though I am often uncertain about if I'll be able to really complete all of it. But I am definitely going to do the best I can, to complete these goals. Anyways, and before I begin to share what the goals are, I want to tell you that I have 3 small and more personal goals, that I have, as well as one big one which is ambitious, but unselfishly so. But I'll get to that, in a moment. Without further ado, I'm now about to get started on my goals for 2019. Now, the first smaller personal goal that I have is to overcome procrastination in my life. And frankly, this has been one that's actually been more of a problem than anyone might realize. Well, maybe except for a few people, but that's beside the point. I mean, often, and I guess in case none of you really realize what procrastination is, it's where you often put off, time, where you often put off doing things or spend your time doing something else, before you finally do something. And I know that the reason why I'm making this a goal is because this is something I really would like to overcome in my life. And I know I've missed out on certain opportunities, and I know that my grades, especially in post-secondary school, have been hampered, by it. And I often did procrastinate, in part because of fear, because frankly, that was part of what I learned, when I was at Booth University College, from there. But the main reason why I often procrastinated was because I would often spend time, doing pleasurable things, the chiefest of which is spending a lot of time with music, along with pacing back and forth or running back and forth with it, because I have something of which, I would share with another video when I have the opportunity. Often, these pleasurable things, make me feel like I should keep going with it, and it is very hard for me to stop doing it, once I get started. And, well, of course, I never really, learned to deal with it, or rather, I should say, I only learned to minimally deal with it. But often then, whenever I procrastinate, I would cut things very close with assignments and stuff. And it's also affected about how I should do things, in life, such as, changing address, which I've done for most things so far, but not everything. And so, what I'm looking to do is to overcome procrastination by living more closely to a schedule, to which part of the resolutions I made is to have a list of priorities. I often did not consistently live according to a schedule. I often would try to memorize things, which is a pretty bad idea, by the way, guys, because as I learned in school, memory is problematic. You can only retain so much. That much I learned in Intro to Psychology, at my first year at Booth University College, and I won't go into details about that, but yeah, it is best that I do that, and all you guys do that too. And of course, I will stick with resolutions, like what I already mentioned. And of course, one other thing which I haven't really tried so much, but am looking forward to doing more is to relax myself. I find I could better do things, when I'm not very energetic. And in fact, me being energetic has contributed to my procrastination, I'm not entirely sure about this in my life, but I do think I am a hyper person. Sometimes certain songs, certain music, certain sounds, and certain events, can really get me excited. And so what I'm looking to do with that is to basically relax myself by meditating, by prayer, and also by having aromatherapy sense, because I find that smelling certain things can actually calm me down. And I did just recently, earlier this year, at the beginning of January, really, get a aromatherapy diffuser with scents in it. So I haven't yet set it up, but I'm about to try it. And what I'm definitely thinking of doing, is to listen to chill out music. And in case you don't really know what that is, chill out music is basically where it's very atmospheric, and it's supposed to give a very calm feeling. And I know I have listened to chill out music, like some of the instrumentals from Dan Gibson, for example. I remember listening to that, when I was growing up, when I was a kid and an adolescent, and when I had a Walkman, I definitely remember listening to that and me going to sleep a lot easier. And I've certainly, listened to chill out music on YouTube, but I'm definitely thinking of doing that a lot more consistently. Maybe every night, if needs be. One other major sort of thing that will help me to relax is what's called ASMR. It's an acronym for something, but I can't really tell you what that acronym stands for. But what ASMR means is basically that tingly sensation you get right at your spine and the adjacent nerves, And it occurs, when you hear certain sounds, whether it's from the mouth, whispering, and even hearing certain taps, and other sort of sounds that you hear. For me, the sort of sounds that help me, that give me that tingly sensation are sounds from the mouth, though I don't think what I'm giving would really count as ASMR. I think I'd have to put more effort into that. But anyways, and I have listened to ASMR, and oh man, I really like it when I hear it. And I find it really helps me to go to sleep, a lot easier. And it certainly, I guess, helps calm me down from being hyper and all that. So anyways, that's really how I'm going to achieve my first goal, to overcome procrastination. Now, the second goal that I'm looking to have for this year is to buy an acoustic bass guitar and to perform songs and or instrumentals, including covers. Now, this was something I actually wanted, in the past, and I have had ample opportunity to, purchase one, but I have made poor financial choices, in my life, and so years have passed me by, and I still don't really have one. And frankly, it wouldn't be the first time I'd be performing musically, starting in grade 7, but ending in grade 12, I used to play the trombone, to which I do have fond memories of performing in the concerts, but since after grade 12, I haven't performed it again, and I've given it away, so I'm really without an instrument, and I've really taken an interest in bass guitar. I've also had interest in the other two instruments that are usually in rock and metal music, the guitar and the drum set. But of course I find that the bass would be a lot easier, especially if I have to simply, perform one string at a time, which which I think would well do for starters, but I'll get to that in a minute. I'm certainly in now a better position, to purchase one since I now have a steady income, and that was another reason, why I never really got to it. Though I did have lump sums, but like I said, I haven't made good financial choices, though that's something I'll be getting to in a moment. And frankly, though, even though I'd be in a better position, I would have to be patient, like I think I may have to wait, a few months before I could really get to that. And because I know it's not cheap, I browsed around before, at places like St. John's and Marshall's, and I know it can cost up to a few hundreds of dollars, though that's mainly for the electric bass guitar. Acoustic bass guitar, however, maybe up to about, what was it, $600, or so. I know that I would like an acoustic bass guitar as opposed to an electric one because it would cost, I'd have to add on amps, to really get a sound out of it. And it may cause some noise, from the basement of the house, I currently live in. And I don't think I want to do that since I'm living, I'm still technically living under my mom's roof. But I find that I would also be, a better fit for me because I also would like to perform it outside and in some other places. And well, after I've moved out, on my own and live in an apartment, at least, on my own. And finally, of course, I would like to say that once I do acquire, the acoustic bass guitar, I would take the time, to learn notes and even certain styles. And you might be surprised that I'm, having the courage, to try and do it all this year. But I guess one inspiring thing that's happened is that my little brother, last year bought a Yamaha keyboard, and amazingly enough, not only that, but he managed, to learn music theory and basically to play keyboard chords. And now he's already a master at it. So my thoughts are, if he can do it, in such a time, I think I can be confident enough in doing it as well. And boy, oh boy, I think I'm going to be so happy once I do so, because I've seen so many videos of people doing covers, and well, bass covers haven't exactly been the best, I think I might do my darnest, to perform well. And I know I'll probably start some things off, a few things at a time, probably start with one note, and I might even attempt to do chords if possible, which I think it is, but I'll have to see when I get there. The third goal that I'm looking to do in 2019 is to not go over budget with non-essentials. And the reason why I'm bringing this up in the first place is because I've had a really poor track record of, spending money. I have, made great strides in saving up, but unfortunately, I have been self-indulgent. I often spend money, to the point that I nearly use it up. And yeah, in retrospect, it's a really bad habit, And a lot of it is because I don't think I've really learned, a lot of self-control. And I know it's a lot more, and I know it's vitally important now that I'm no longer, going to school. I guess, which I'll let you know, I graduated spring last year from Booth University College. But I know that I cannot be so frivolous, in my spending, or else there may be consequences. Chiefly the fear of me being homeless. And how I'm mainly going to do that is to basically go in accordance to a budget, and one that my mom, has basically set up, or rather, we sat down and she helped set up with me. Last year in about the spring, I attempted to do one of my own, though of a different style than what my mom set up, But basically, I know that I'm gonna have to spend a certain allowance, per month, while spending, other things, on bills, including groceries and a cell phone, and even helping out, with some of the water, the house, as well as for transportation and also pensions. And yeah, for all of those of you who are either under 18 or 18 over, it's really important you start having a pension right now because it will affect you in the long run. And also some, as well as toiletries and some other miscellaneous, things that you may want to spend on. Anyways, and if I keep up with this sort of budgeting, as well as prioritizing, certain spending, then I certainly have high hopes, to master the art of spending and finally be a better consumer than I was in years past. Now, I actually do have a fourth sort of goal that I have for 2019. And basically, the fourth sort of small personal goal that I have is to rent a car, with rental insurance and to go on a summer trip of my own choosing. And I guess I'll tell you right off the bat, I do love to travel. Even if it's just within province, I do love to travel. And before I really get on, with the goal, I certainly would say that I have gone places, in my entire life, the biggest one in my entire life is that when I was 11 years old, from December of 2002 to January of 2003, my family, as well as my grandparents and my relatives on my dad's side, have all gone on a cruise trip that sailed out from Miami to Cozumel, Mexico, to the Grand Cayman Islands, which is a British overseas territory, to Ochos Rios, Jamaica, and finally all the way back to Miami before coming back home. That was the biggest one in my entire life. Well, I have also gone places mainly across Western Canada, mainly to Regina, Saskatoon, Edmonton, Calgary, and Kenora, as well as around, Manitoba, in Birds Hill Park, as well as Riding Mountain National Park a couple times, Dauphin a couple times, Gimli many times, for the summer vacations. That was and my family used to take us out, to Gimli, every summer, when I was a kid. And I certainly have very fond memories there. And those are about the places I've gone to. But anyways, and the reason why, I'm bringing this up, for a goal, is that most trips I've ever gone to have been with my dad, I'm guessing he and I really do have a love of traveling, My dad, my brother, and I have gone places, a lot, though in recent years it's usually just been him and I, and usually, we have gone places, like very recently, we had gone on a United States trip, in 2015, where, let's see here, we were going south as far as the north part of Kansas, to meet my great aunt Pat, who lives in that area, as well as, going through North Dakota again, which I've been to Grand Forks, many times over, and also going through certain states for the first time, including South Dakota, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, as well as, coming through back to certain states, again, like Illinois again, which I've been to Chicago twice. We went there to we went there to like go to the Field Museum, which I finally got to see, the hides of the Lions of Savo, because I have memories of watching The Ghost in the Darkness, from when I was a young age. But other than that, the museum wasn't that much for me. But what was worth it for me was going to the Shed Aquarium, which I saw marine life, including a show with beluga whales. And I really liked that, as well as going outside, and also, I guess, going boating on Lake Michigan and also along the river through the city there. And just walking out and enjoying the nice outdoors. In fact, that's what I like a lot about traveling, is enjoying the sightseeing, and that. And I guess, and before I really move on further, we also took Canadian trips together, to which in the summer of 2016, I got to go to BC for the very first time. Yeah, it took a really long while for me to be in that part of the country, as well as being in West Edmonton Mall for the second time. To which the first time I'd been there was right after I finished grade 9. And then, of course, the last trip I took, was the summer before last, when we went to Kenora. And, of course, I actually got to go on a lake cruise for the first time, which I really enjoyed the sight, and it's moments like these, along with the nice sunsets, the rocky landscape, and just walking around different places is why I like traveling. But of course, I've always had to be accompanied with someone, chiefly my dad. And now that I really am building up an income, with a job, I would certainly wish to take a trip of my choosing. Again, even if it's only within province, and I might, choose to go back to certain places like, let's see here, like Duck Mountain, for example. I don't think I've been there in quite a while, as well as maybe going on a camping trip to Birds Hill Park. I haven't been there in a while either. As well as maybe going to Hecla Island. I also haven't been there in so many years. I don't think I've really been there since I was a kid, and I certainly would like to see, I guess, more of the Interlake area. But of course I would have to basically travel, within reason. And what I mean by that is with consideration with, the type of job I have, and again, waiting and building up. But I think I'd be in good position, for that sort of thing. And of course, before I really rent a car and all that, I know I'm going to have to get rental car insurance, I actually did take the time to learn about that, Well, learn a bit about that, but I'd have to basically visit either Autopac or MPI, or an MPI site, before to which I'll get information before I really go ahead with it. But from what I've learned, I don't think it's really going to be all that expensive. And I think just renting a car, is just going to prove to be costly and all that. But anyways, once I do learn about insurance and pick out a choice, and of course another reason why I'm also bringing this up again is because I missed out on one last year, mainly because I'm working part-time, and I guess I'm only going to gain so many vacation hours, and I'm going to have to ask, what days I'm going to have off, before I really have a go with it. And finally, I now come to the big goal that I hope to achieve in the year 2019. And this one is a big goal. It's an ambitious goal, but one I would also say is unselfish, The big and unselfishly ambitious goal I have for 2019 is to write a blog about bringing an end to homelessness, poverty, unemployment, and hunger in Canada. Basically putting an end to social ills, I guess starting more locally and then building our way up to the nation later, and hopefully the entire world. But I do look to, I guess, write a blog in which would go nationwide. And this, of course, is based on the thoughts, that have been simmering in my mind, for years. As well as, based on what I've been taught, at Booth University College, I know that for all those years in my life, I've often had trouble, finding work, as well as, gaining an income. And it's been frustrating, and because of that, I've often been wondering and thinking about how to really solve this problem, and not only that, but also learn why so many people, often lack even basic needs. And I guess part of that, has come about, because I've often developed feelings of empathy, and I certainly have taken to heart, some of the teachings, of Jesus of Nazareth, because he definitely, had a heart, for the poor, and a lot of that has carried over, and I just developed a tender heart, for people like that, and basically part of the thought of me, going for a goal such as this occurred about, let's see here. I think it occurred either before the last school year that I was at or before that. This was something, that I've been doing my own sort of personal research, Googling it, as well as even writing down on the board, on how to solve this problem, and of course pacing back and forth and having a lot of thoughts, in my mind about how to solve this problem. And at first I initially thought that the solution, to this problem was to strengthen the nonprofit sector. And before I really tell you what I mean by that, I would want to tell you, what the nonprofit is in contrast to a for-profit or business sort of sector. And basically I've learned that, not only is there such a thing as a nonprofit organization, there's such a thing I've learned, as a nonprofit corporation. It can be incorporated in the same way a business or for-profit corporation is, but the major difference between the major contrast that the nonprofit corporation is not to divide, any surplus, funds, that it gains, after expenses, and a nonprofit corporation has the advantage, of not having to pay taxes, in contrast to a for-profit. Because in a for-profit, they have to pay taxes as well as expenses, but what happens, is that, and what I've learned, is how the for-profit, splits up, often splits the amount between, shareholders who are usually rich people. And of course, and when I realized, that contrast, I was shocked, and I was outraged. And I soon began to think, oh, no wonder, there's some social ills there. It's not really being shared to people who really need it. Especially, since, it's going, and how it's, how it was going on to a trend, that I've learned, while I was still in Booth University College, and I certainly learned, learning, I guess first in my first year in Intro to Sociology, that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and I'm afraid it might get to the point, where there might even cease to be a middle class, because of it. There just might be a super rich upper class and a really poor lower class. And as those thoughts, occurred in my mind, I was not only shocked, I was also outraged and pretty sad. My heart goes out to all those people, who are struggling and don't have a lot of access to adequate resources. And the worst part about it is that even kids are there are even kids, that are suffering this sort of thing. And if this sort of thing happens to kids, it could have negative consequences, and there's much I learned, from developmental psychology, is that not only could it harbor, negative emotions, but it could even do worse things, like have poor nutrition, which could even have stunted growth, as well as a few other, as well as possibly being unsanitized, which really is unthinkable, but unfortunately that's the reality, for a certain number of people. And at first I thought what was needed is that people should band up together and just pool assets, into, I guess, having stores and other services, that can pool the assets, keep it and then use it to spend on, the needs of the people, as well as like mainly how they have to have jobs and how they have to spend it on housing as well as adequate food. Basically have them a decent life and not just scrounging for something or living on the bare necessities, like we would like us to really live and not survive. But then as time went on and after I graduated, from post-secondary school, I came to realize, however, that the problem is in fact much bigger than I would have thought. Like, it's not just, funds, it's not just funds that are lacking. I came to find out that part of that it's really a complex picture, that there's several factors, that contribute to people, that there's several factors, in society that contribute, ideas of economy, money, politics, as well as property rights are all part of the problem, and without getting into too much detail as to what that is, often I realize that housing and the cost of food and other necessities keeps going up, because there's inflation, which is something I learned, because sometimes, there's a lot more money supply coming in, in our nation. And not only that, but also I found out that we have only one kind of, what's called legal tender. And legal tender means that it's a payment you make to, pay to satisfy debts. And certainly during those years, I learned about and had an interest in what's called complementary currency, which is basically, where you can trade with another sort of currency that's not national currency. Part of what sparked me on that is that I remembered about Canadian Tire Money. That's an example of complementary currency, as well as it could be done locally, or rather in a municipality, because I know Calgary, for instance, has, a Calgary dollar, but it's on par with the Canadian dollar. And also in other places like the Ithaca hours, in the United States, and the Chiemgauer in Germany has something like that too. But getting on point, only our Canadian dollars and cents, are legal tender. And so, and I would say that I realized that with just by having that as legal tender, it really hinders people from gaining jobs, because there's labor costs, that are associated with, being hired and running a business, and I guess just running a service also. And of course, all of these, are also like, and of course, And of course, usually I thought that I could bypass politics, but I soon came to realize, in that same thought, that it's part of the problem too. That that I think there needs to be changes and amendments, that have to be made in order to really help our social ill, to really put an end, to really reduce and as well as put an end to social ills. And then of course, there's property rights. And I guess it's in connection not just with the cost, but also that homes are just expensive, and people, may have to resort to take out mortgages that they may not be able to pay. And and I certainly was of the conviction, then and even now, that I think homes should be a lot more affordable, because it's one of our basic needs is shelter. And how could you put a huge price, on things you need to live? And I know I've gone into a lot of, detail about that, but that's just what I was thinking then and thinking now, which is now leading to the goal of the blog, to end all these social ills, which I know is not going to be completed this year. I know it would take years, of planning and also making connections, and I guess even political campaigning, in part, to achieve that goal. I would think that'd be achieved down the road, but I just would want to get the word out for starters. And I know that I wanted to do that thing last summer, but of course, as I've pointed out earlier in my first sort of small goal, I procrastinated, and even in the hours I wasn't really working, and it's pretty sad. Well, actually, no, it's not just, because of procrastination. It's also because that as I was thinking along these things, through my pacing around back and forth, thinking about these things and sitting down, I often run into a lot of, issues and a lot of problems, which makes me rethink my situation, which makes me rethink, how to tackle these issues. And often, I just keep these things mostly in my head. Again, while mapping out how to really deal with it. And even now, I found myself having to tweak it so much that I figured that the big plan would have to go out in steps, rather than trying to take it all in one swoop. So basically, I'm now beginning to finally do what I've better been doing, since last year. And I'm now inspired to now really get on with it after 2 years of really giving much thought to it. So anyways, those are my goals, the one big one and the few small ones. And thank you for listening, especially for the big one. So anyways, have yourselves a really good day. Peace.